that this presentation is going to be in English. We try to teach maths and Spanish, but we haven't got so far yet. But if any one of you want to say any question, ask any question in Spanish, make any comment in Spanish, or whatever you like to say, and you don't feel comfortable doing it in English, just say it in Spanish, and we'll do a bit of translation. We try to do everything in English, it will be smoother and faster, but just don't stop saying anything because you feel that you can't say it properly. Say it in Spanish, wherever you can, or Portuguese, or whatever is your language, and we'll try to translate it for math. Or for everyone else here who doesn't speak Spanish also. Well, welcome to Agile 2008. We're really glad you are here. And today, we're going to talk about distributed Agile. How many of you have been in distributed projects, offshoring? You have some experience? Oh, experience. Sounds good.
All right, to start with, as many of you know, how many of you have actually been involved with Agile projects today? Okay. So, would you agree with this statement? Okay.
Is it hard? How was for you? Was it really hard? Was it easy? Have you been in Agile projects, non-Agile projects? Which one was harder? Any opinions?
We'll ask binary questions.
Much harder.
Much harder?
Yes.
Why so hard? It's pretty simple. Agile is simple. It's few rules.
Because you have to change your mind to work in a different way. There is a paradigm that it's different to the previous kind of traditional projects. To leave the team to self-organize and all that stuff related to Agile, that leave the responsibility to the team instead of a manager saying what to do, the team. I think that's the main reason is the change of the paradigm.
Okay, so following rules is quite simple. Someone gives you the rule, you follow it. Having to make your own decisions, having the team to be self-organized, you think that's much more harder?
Yeah.
Just anyway.
Simple doesn't mean easy.
Simple doesn't mean easy, I like it.
So if we all agree that Agile is hard, then we'll make a statement. When we talk about distributed, a lot of you have indicated that you've done distributed work before. Have you done distributed waterfall or distributed Agile? How about distributed waterfall? Show of hands. Distributed Agile? Some of you have done both. Which would you guys say is harder? Waterfall or Agile? Or, yeah, waterfall or Agile, distributed sense.
Agile is newer in the company, so it's harder because of that.
Okay.
Were there any cultural issues with your company? Was not ready to go for Agile, or were not something like that?
I think it's not ready to go for Agile.
I've done offshoring with China, India, and now Argentina. China, India before, waterfall. And it's easier in the sense that, they work, you don't know what they're doing. Suddenly they show you something. And sometimes you accept, sometimes you fight. With Agile, you need to be there, practicing the day-to-day and things like that. So it could be easier or more difficult, but I think it's more, visible, which is good.
So as we go through this and we talk about it, what we're trying to do is lay a little bit of groundwork, and get some opinions and some points from you as the group. And then we'll go through a number of approaches and a number of reasons as to why it's more difficult and what we can do to help it out, to make it not necessarily easier, but to keep people focused on the direction that they need to go in order to actually make it work. So if distributed Agile is so hard, why should we be using it? We all have seen a lot of the value proposition from Agile itself. There's lots discussion in the literature about the throughput gains and productivity gains of using Agile. Do we have any people here representing customers, people who have had teams do projects for them and use an Agile approach? Every once in a while we get a PO or a customer that comes to one of these conferences. All right, well, I'll pretend that there's one out there and I'll talk about it. Basically, a lot of organizations like to use an Agile approach because the customers, the product owners, are able to get what they want a lot more easily, a lot quicker. Their expectations are met better because that's what we say Agile is all about. So the idea is that in an organization, in a lot of organizations, companies grow by merger, they grow by buying other companies, and when that happens, they end up in a distributed sense. Everybody doesn't always get moved to a single location. So if you're going to use Agile because you find that it helps you out, that it's more valuable, then you have to be able to accommodate how your business grows, how your business works. So when we look at what distributed is, how would you define distributed?
Maybe one team in USA, one team in Argentina could be distributed. But what will be, well, we'll say will be out working on one office, another team, same company, same building, different office. That's distributed, or maybe that's also collocated.
So they've done a lot of studies about how people interact and how people communicate. And in recent work, last 10, 20 years, they have been able to determine that as soon as you move people apart more than 10 meters, they tend to stop talking to each other. So in the early days of software development, where everybody had their own office, as soon as you put them in their own office and you move to the office next door, people stop communicating. How many of you have an office?
Or how many of you work with people which is maybe in the same building but in another floor, a couple of floors? How much times do you climb the stairs back and forth to see them?
You can see the difference.
Or maybe now, same city, different offices across the city.
There's companies that run out of space in one building or on one floor, move to another floor, move to another building. And again, as soon as you have that, even though you're the same company, you've distributed yourself. So when we talk about distributed Agile, what we're talking about is any time everybody is not co-located. So co-located, when we teach Agile, when we start the whole approach, the mentoring, the tutoring, the easiest thing to do, as many of you learned in the CSM courses that we've had this week, it's easiest to start out in a single room with everybody either around a table, with cards on a wall, being able to move tasks, understand what the whole processes are. Because as you pointed out, there's a lot of discipline, there's a lot of rigor needed to do Agile well. It's easiest to learn when everybody is right there, so that you can talk to them, so that you can work with them, so that you can pair with them. As soon as you are no longer able to do that, all of a sudden you have the situation called distributed Agile. And so what we're going to talk about here is how do you cope with that? All right. So there's a lot of plays on words here with English, and unfortunately it doesn't necessarily translate well to Spanish, but we're calling this talk The Elements of Agile. There used to be a book called The Elements of Style, which is what we use to teach people how to write in English. It's very popular and hardly ever read, like most books. So this is The Elements of Agile. These are the basic principles. We have paraphrased these from the Agile Manifesto. Feel free to go there and take a look at it. We mostly paraphrase them to make them fit on a single slide. So some of the words are slightly different. You want to go through them, Emilio?
Sure. satisfy the customer. If anyone doesn't, I think you pretty know each other, all of these, but if anyone doesn't understand one, just let me know. I go pretty quickly because I guess everyone knows them. Satisfy the customer, work in software, welcome change in requirements and priorities, deliver incrementally and frequently, personal interactions, all roles, motivating teams and customers, promote this is hard, sorry. Help me with that one. Sustainability, thank you. Promote sustainability through good processes, technical excellence, maintain no debts, technical debts, and any other debts also. Maintain simplicity, support self-organization, and release retrospection.
So the last point is a very good one. When we say we want to relish retrospection, what that really implies is that because we're acknowledging that Agile is hard, we need to continuously improve. We need to continuously get better. So anytime we do something, anytime we go through the cycle, we want to do it again. We want to look at what we've done, ask ourselves if there's anything that we can do better, and then improve upon it. And the first one, again, as we point out, is always the one we start with. Our goal here is to satisfy the customer. We want working software. We want to keep it working. We want to make sure that we meet people's expectations. So once we have this as a background, the idea was to talk about, well, how are we going to do Agile? So we came across this. We're going to talk about English. We might as well talk about math.
This will be the hard part. It's for you, man. He's the mathematician.
So we're going to go through some definitions. For any of you guys who have forgotten your maths, we're going to talk about some theorems, some corollaries, some lemmas, and then down at the bottom, which is probably hidden for most of you, postulates. This is all familiar to you guys? Remember all this from college? Yeah.
You can say no, huh? Don't be ashamed.
It won't hurt any of our feelings. So, okay, a theorem is a theoretical statement that you prove. The corollary is something that you get to as you're going through proving that theorem. The lemma is just another little helping theorem that you find on the side. So as you're proving the original theorem, you go through and you find this other thing that comes out as kind of a fact. And the postulate is one of those things that you actually don't have to prove. Everybody accepts. So we found some of these. The very first postulate is that Agile is really about being reactive to changing business environments. We didn't invent this methodology to get really good at this methodology.
What do you think about this? Do you agree? Is your purpose to become Agile masters, to be every time better Agile, and just say I'm Scrum Master, I'm Scrum Practitioner, I'm Scrum of Scrums, which is the real purpose of you professionals, of your companies? Is your company interest to just follow Agile practices and be able to go out there and say we are the best in Agile, we follow all the Agile practices through like Ken Schwaber's book? What's the real purpose of that? What we're trying to say here is Agile is just a mean to get somewhere else. Which is the place where we like to go? Which is a real goal?
So I've coined the phrase canonical Agile. And canonical Agile to me is when you get the books and you read through it and you follow it precisely. I don't know if you guys have ever had the situation, but I certainly have, and a lot of folks that I've worked with, when they say to me, but that's not in the book. We can't do that. And that's when I take the book and throw it out the window and say, okay, now what are we going to do? So the idea
Google
here,
it.
yeah, unfortunately Google's everywhere. So what we're really going to look at here is how do we meet this? How do we fit the changing business environments? Because in case any of you took any free time yesterday and read the newspaper headlines, business environments are changing. They are changing now, and this is a great time for a conference like this because this month, and it's not the month isn't even over, the business environments around the world have changed so remarkably that everything that we started September with, we've thrown out the window because most of it doesn't work. We've had organizations at least in the States, we have a lot of organizations that have billions of dollars worth of contracts outsourced from companies like Lehman Brothers, Wachovia Bank, WAMU. Some of these names may be familiar to you, but none of them exist anymore. So some of them have gotten taken over, and maybe the contracts will still exist. But I talked to my friends at WAMU, Washington Mutual, which is an Agile organization, and they say to me, I guess I'm looking for a job. Because the bank's business has changed, the bank's government has changed, and now a lot of what they're trying to do is no longer there. Of course, they're being snapped up by a lot of the other organizations, and they've been bought out. A lot of these organizations have been bought out in part or in pieces by other banks and other institutions or other governments. Like, I understand Iceland was bought out by Russia.
Alaska was bought by USA also.
I thought Alaska was part of Russia.
Oh, really?
No, we're going to try to keep out of politics. But with what's going on with a lot of these buyouts is that the companies that are buying out the other companies are maintaining the Agile units in toto. So the folks that have been working in these new methodologies, because they have been so reactive and been able to demonstrate that it's the other companies, like Citibank is sloughing off their hardline IT organizations for some of these new groups that they're buying. Not only is this really cool for our methodology, but it's really cool to see how fast this is happening. So when they go to lay off half their IT group, it's like, well, I've got seniority. Yeah, but you don't know how to do software. And that's the people that are going. So we've got this. We want to make sure people understand that what we're doing in Agile, or what we're doing here, is meeting customer expectations and needs, not about doing good practices. Hopefully you do good practices, but that's not why we exist. Nobody's going to get a medal for doing excellent stand-ups. But if you do excellent products, you're going to get a medal. So we've got the first theorem of development.
Okay. The fusion of all the Agile practices allows teams to maximize their throughput and more reliable meet their product owners' expectation. So, we all believe on this, right? We are all here because we believe that we get all the Agile practices, we get all of them, and we'll say maximize or we'll increase our probability. Agile is not a silver bullet. It's not going to guarantee you any success. I think we all believe on that. It's just going to increase your probability of being success. And basically that's what we're saying here. If you take all the Agile practices, it's going to maximize your throughput and you'll be more reliable and you have more chances to meet your product owner's expectations.
The product owner isn't the customer.
True.
Sorry.
They're the customer
I'm
service.
not buying your theorem.
I can prove it. It's a theorem. Well, we'll leave that one for the question period.
Right. But I don't believe product owner is the right word.
I'll give you that.
Okay.
How many of you guys use a product owner as a customer? So a lot of people who do Scrum end up using that. The point that Mary is making is that the customer is ultimately the customer. When we do Scrum and